What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Today I'm going to be giving you some very honest thoughts on everything revealed about Starfield at the Bethesda E3 showcase, and it seems like the tech issues that life decided we needed around one of the most important days in the year for us are actually a good thing, because now Todd Howard has revealed even more info about Starfield and you can get the most up-to-date version of our opinion possible. So let's start with the trailer. The first thing that Bethesda showed us, or was leaked early really, to introduce us to their new world of Starfield. Now look, I know a lot of people absolutely lost their mind with hype and got super excited watching the Starfield trailer, or even cried in awe of what they were witnessing. But I've got to be honest with you guys, we really weren't that impressed. I just feel like someone needs to say it. The vibe of that Starfield trailer is a slice of bread on a plate with a glass of water. Like, it was pretty bland. Now let me just say early on in this video, before people accuse me of being overly negative or nitpicky, I'm not critiquing the Starfield game itself. I'm mostly just not a fan of the way it was presented to us, particularly in the trailer. If it wasn't for the concept art and the interviews with Todd Howard later on, I would actually be super disappointed. Some of the concept art and some interview quotes are really the saving grace here, and we'll get into that soon, so don't worry, I do have some excitement to share. But the trailer itself, outside of the neat music which Bethesda games tend to have, was just quite boring, to be honest. Think about it, if this was any other game studio and not Bethesda, I don't think people would really be excited. Like, a lot is riding on the fact that this is made by the same people who made Skyrim and Fallout 4, and that may very well be justified, but simply looking at the trailer in a bubble, I'm not that impressed. If you're a fan of sci-fi and just love everything sci-fi no matter what it is, then fair enough. And it's not like we expected Star Wars, but the trailer we saw was filled with the most generic sci-fi type stuff possible. It was a pretty generic spaceship, a generic sci-fi gun on the table, a generic space outfit, a super generic bland planet that looks like a barren asteroid without much on it. Even the robot, which there's a good chance will just be a meme companion, wasn't particularly unique. In an interview, Todd Howard talked about attention to detail on things like the sheen of the cheese sandwich and how every button on the ship is labeled, and while that's all fine and dandy, I think a lot of that stuff is mainly hype. It's like the whole 16 times the detail stuff that doesn't really amp me up as much as the actual content of what's in the game itself. I think what Bethesda players wanted to see and love a lot more are the worlds of themselves, the extensive and well thought out crafting of different factions and cities, all the diverse places and characters we can meet and interact with, as well as all of the ways that we as a player can approach and roleplay in a big open world. We want to see the places we'll get lost in, and in a sci-fi world that means we're hoping for fruity planets with alien characters that hopefully are not just kind of creature enemies, though that's still cool and we want that, but actual intelligent and sentient aliens who we can talk to, help, and I mean really play as if it were possible. I have a feeling we won't be playing as an alien race, but it would be cool. If we can meet them and they have their own civilizations like aliens tend to in many other sci-fi epics, which Todd has referred to Starfield as, then that would make sense and I'd be happy. But just from the trailer, we haven't seen anything like that. Todd Howard did mention how Starfield will be like Indiana Jones meets NASA meets League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and that piques my interest because League of Extraordinary Gentlemen has characters with supernatural abilities, so that would be amazing to see. Think of a Bethesda version of what biotics are in Mass Effect, essentially space mages. But why then did they go with this bland everything grey and white trailer? I can't tell you how disappointed I was to wake up around 4 AM in the morning just to see that. The feel from the trailer is just very Elon Musk Mars rover simulator, and some people like that energy, and if you do enjoy it, that's fine of course, but we personally here at FudgeMuppet don't really vibe the hyper-realistic space station type of theme, and don't personally understand the massive levels of hype generated by the trailer. Also, considering this is a brand new IP from Bethesda, I'm not sure if it's the best strategy to show something this bland and market the game with a sense of mystery. I mean, I know they like to make people speculate and get people talking to drive engagement, but I feel as if they'd get even more attention for their game and more eyeballs on it if they really just went hard and tried to wow the audience and just blow our minds. Based on some of the concept art, it looks just like there were a bunch of different environments that they could use to make a cool trailer, but instead we got a space rock, which worried us more to begin begin with, because ever since hearing the name Starfield, we thought the game might be very barren and just look like this much of the time. I suppose with a new IP, I just would have loved to see some kind of story hook or any idea at all about what's going on in the game. We hardly got told anything, and we still don't know much other than we're part of some group called Constellation, and we're space explorers a few hundred years in the future from now. Think about it this way, Elder Scrolls and Fallout already have established universes. You could get away with showing a super vague Elder Scrolls trailer, like they kind of did honestly, and everyone would have a billion things to talk about and argue about and actually reference and pull from because there's pre-established lore. Even in the Skyrim trailer, we get introduced to Alduin's Wall and the Dragonborn prophecy and actually get a sense of what the game might be about. I can also remember the Fallout 4 trailer that had all the faction leaders actually speaking and voicing their ideologies, and it just made things feel deeper from the get-go, and that's with a universe people are already familiar with. Again, this isn't saying Starfield is a shallow game at all. It could in theory be one of the best game experiences ever, but the trailer itself was indeed shallow. I mean, here at FudgeMuppet, we've made so many videos that involve us getting the most cinematic shots we can of characters, factions, and various environments and whacking them all together to present the coolest look of a certain topic. I just know it would have been so easy for Bethesda to whip together a bunch of awesome things from their world and show fans, but clearly that was not their intention. Todd talked about how they'll explore themes like science and religion, and that sounds cool, but I just wish we actually saw it. Like even a 3-second pan of some cultist praying on a sci-fi looking planet to some obscure statue of a god would have been so much more captivating than what we got. We didn't see any gameplay either, which also removes a very important area of discussion for us to speculate on when it comes to our thoughts regarding a game. What Starfield truly is and how it will all work just isn't that clear at the moment. So in that respect, I am disappointed, but I am also somewhat hopeful because the saving grace for me, which again still isn't getting me to some euphoric state of hype or anything like that just yet, is the concept art and the interviews. So the concept art was actually revealed in the Into the Starfield video on the Washington Post, which was later uploaded on Bethesda's YouTube channel. If you've seen it, then you'd know that thankfully the game probably won't just be flying around moons and asteroids, searching for signs of life and collecting iron ore to unlock ship upgrades. At least I hope the game is nothing like that. Instead, we've got a few pictures we can draw inspiration from and talk about. So firstly, we have some space explorers coming into a cave, which looks fun, although straight off the bat I can say the very lonesome vibes interest me a lot less than the ones with Civilization. I wasn't a fan of the whole Fallout 76 idea of going around and finding logs of dead people or uncovering things that were. I'm a lot more interested in exploring what exists now and living in a world that remains interesting in the present, and I'm not saying Starfield will be like 76 with only logs and robot NPCs, but I guess I'd just like to emphasize I hope there's plenty of societal exploration and that the concept art with the cities really lives up to what it shows, because don't forget, concept art can be way cooler than the end outcome, and this is often the case with many games. But let's take a look at some of the city art designs. We've got this one here where some kind of large structure is nestled into the side of a rocky landscape with some nice greenery and some white birds flying into the distance. It could be a city, it could also be a factory, it's hard to know for sure, but I do like the vibes of it. Hopefully we get to explore it in a lot of depth. There's also this shot of a pilot outside his ship standing with a city in the background that you can only imagine is highly populated. Now, Todd mentioned there being set locations just like in Skyrim, so think Solitude, Markarth, and so on, but in 2021, and definitely by the end of 2022 when Starfield is releasing, the size and scales of places like Whiterun, as beautiful as they are and as much as I love them, won't live up to huge sci-fi city standards. A huge takeaway from Cyberpunk 2077 actually is that no matter how big and lovely and cool a city looks, it has to feel like you can really immerse yourself there, and the world building needs to be strong. Art can go a really long way, but let's just hope there's enough substance to back it up. And there might be. Todd did mention that the big leaps in technology between Skyrim and Starfield will mean Starfield will be much more robust. It's interesting to think also that this is not a game confined to a single landmass. It's an open world game that is supposed to be multi-planetary, so it'll be interesting to see how it all works and how much of a planet is actually explorable. I can't help but imagine it will actually be a hub-based game in a sense, but the hubs are so big it still feels like an open world game. Then again, if we truly can go and land a ship anywhere on a planet and get out and walk around and there's heaps to do, I'd love that and I'd be very impressed. Todd has said that he doesn't want to set any crazy expectations, but that they've built the cities like they've built them before and have lots of locations that they're building like they've built before, and that they want the experience of us exploring these locations to be as rewarding as it's been before. Big if true. That all sounds good to me, especially because I do like the idea of set handcrafted locations more than procedurally generated ones. Another piece of concept art shows a big alien looking jungle, and it's a nice piece of art, but I don't have that much to say about it. Every sci-fi world tends to have their dense jungle planet, and I imagine Starfield is no different. I just hope there's more nuance to it, because as much as I like the art, it's still generic as far as sci-fi goes, and that goes for a lot of this art. Even though it can look cool, much of it isn't exactly distinguished from other sci-fi. If I were to show you just concept art, not an in-game screenshot from something like The Outer Worlds, you will recognize its style and aesthetic straight away. That 20s, 30s vibe is quite strong, and there's a lot of character to the world. I know Starfield is meant to be more grounded in a more realistic future, but it could still have more of a distinguished vibe than what we've seen. I could show you Mass Effect screenshots, and there's a lot that is uniquely Mass Effect. Same thing goes for other sci-fi universes. Even things like Warhammer 40k, they have unique art styles and universes that set them apart from others, but I'm yet to see anything particularly Starfieldy outside of associating generic sci-fi with Starfield. Hopefully that changes with time. Todd did say that as they show more, hopefully it'll carve out its own niche. We still have about a year and a half until release, but as it stands right now, I'll put it this way: if you were to go onto Pinterest and type in sci-fi, these pieces of art would rank in there as low to mid-tier in how unique and interesting they are. There's a lot of competition creatively in the sci-fi space, if you think about it, and I'm hoping Bethesda can really bring something special to the table, something that just makes that trailer look like an April Fool's joke by comparison. Another piece of concept art for Starfield shows a kind of human-looking camp with wind farms in the distance and a very cold atmosphere. Everyone's rugged up to stay warm, but again, the whole shot is missing pizzazz or wow factor. That said, while I'm not a fan of many of the kind of NASA outfits we've seen or just generic human settler outfits, I definitely like stuff like this, which we saw in the Into the Starfield video too. There's also a picture of a loading dock vehicle bay type area, and I think the vehicle we can see there looks cool enough. Hopefully we can drive it on some planet, but that's all I've got to say about this one. And of course we have the shot of encountering those aliens on a planet. Kind of reminds me of walking through some place in Fallout that was nuked and seeing centaurs on their way to greet you. It's cool to see aliens finally, but also I guess it's kind of a necessity in any sci-fi game. Like, I would hope there's aliens. It's entry level for the genre, but nice to see still. And finally we have another one of my favorite artworks of the bunch, what appears to be some massive city above the water. A futuristic city meets oil rig type thing. It's hard to tell exactly what it is, but I like the orange force field looking thing it's got, and the fact that it looks like there will be plenty of people to meet there. This is the stuff that gets me the most excited. Simply put, imagine how much better the trailer would be shot in a location like that instead of a space rock. In sci-fi games, space rocks are literally the most boring planets to do missions on. I can remember going to the planet Scylla in the Outer Worlds and thinking it was kind of boring, although even that had aliens on it. So I'm not blown away by the concept art, but there's some stuff there, and I guess I'm just relieved to see it after that trailer. But also, let's take a look at some of the most important things Todd Howard actually talked about that I haven't really brought up so far. So let's say the obligatory truth that we need to take everything Todd says with a grain of salt. But he does like to say how the game will be like Skyrim in space. He said that by default we join an organization called Constellation, which seems to be involved in the main story, and that at the outset we choose our character's background with many customization options that will impact how some things in the game unfold. This sounds pretty exciting because while I'm sure there's more character diversity for builds in a game like Skyrim, simply due to there being 10 playable races and more pre-existing lore, we haven't really had early game choices in terms of who your character actually is, besides the ones we make up in our head, lead to different outcomes later in the game. To be fair though, we don't know how in-depth this really will be. It could be as impactful as the dialogue flavor that much of Cyberpunk's start game choices led to, and not as fleshed out as we'd want. Hopefully it's way better than choosing your aptitude in the Outer Worlds, such as beverage service technician, and getting some forgettable and menial buff. Todd does keep hammering the be who you want type thing, and said that Starfield is structured a bit like Skyrim. He said there's one story that we're telling, and then we have a lot of other ones like we love to do. So being with the faction called Constellation seems to be the main part, but then he talks about how there's other factions you can join, and that you can really carve your own path. He said their hope is that each player feels like they could say, here's who I want to be in this universe, and then we're giving them an outlet to express that. Now look, that all sounds great. As big lovers of RPG elements, this all sounds like what we'd want in the game, but I still just wish they showed us some more of this in action. Is this really a situation where players will have their Dark Brotherhood character as they did in Skyrim, who sneaks around the place and uses daggers? It just doesn't have that feeling to me just yet, and from what we've seen, it feels more like what flavor of Space Explorer are you, and less about what playstyle you use being quite a defining part of your character, like a mage, a warrior, or so on. But we'll see. I hope I'm massively surprised. After all, I do want Starfield to be an amazing game. If there's any sort of supernatural space powers whatsoever, then things will be much spicier playstyle-wise than I'm expecting. Something to keep in mind is that because the game doesn't seem as futuristic as other titles like Mass Effect, some of the tech just isn't strong yet. Todd mentions that planet-to-planet communication isn't necessarily a thing, and that you could potentially use that to your advantage in-game. Sounds like a good opportunity to play double agent with certain factions. Todd also said there will be exotic weapons, though that tends to be the exception to the rule. It feels like they're going for a more realistic tone, and Todd said that the more exotic ones feel exotic in the reality of the game. We can also confirm Starfield is first and third person, which is something I enjoy about Bethesda's existing games. He also said Starfield is designed to be played for a long time, similar to how people are still playing Skyrim to this day, but most importantly, he actually said that it's also a bit more hardcore of a role-playing game than we've done. It's got some really great character systems. He said they're going to go back to some of the things that they used to do in games long ago that they felt have really let players express the character they want to be. Now this is one of my favorite things he mentioned because it reminds me of the older systems, like having character attributes that can change things about your character, like maybe their speed or their endurance and so on. Who knows exactly what they're doing, but it's nice to have an explicit mention of sorts that they're not going to be dumbing down RPG elements. And that pretty much wraps up my thoughts. I would say that 70% of my excitement actually comes from things that Todd has said, so long as they hold up, which isn't necessarily the case, we'll have to wait and see, and the remaining 30% comes from the concept art and seeing that there will be some diversity with different planets and different places. So to sum it up, we obviously didn't like the trailer much, and the concept art isn't mind-blowing for sure, though some of it's decent. Todd's statements are the best part, so I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see what info comes out next. We're just staying very measured as far as hype goes, and we haven't fallen in love with Starfield just yet, and haven't really seen that much to fall in love with, no matter how nice that music sounds. Social media links are in the description below. Thank you for watching, my name is Michael, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.